The scent of expensive wine and sizzling steak filled the air. Crystal chandeliers rained golden light over velvet chairs and polished floors. In the middle of all that luxury, a woman in a plain grey dress paused at the entrance. Elizabeth Crawford, one of the richest women in America, was unrecognizable. Her tailored power suits were gone. No bodyguards, no entourage, no trace of her billion-dollar empire. Just a cardigan, scuffed flats, and a quiet look in her eyes. The hostess glanced her up and down, lips curling with disdain. "Dinner for one?" Her voice was sugary, but her eyes dismissed Elizabeth as if she were invisible. Elizabeth nodded. The hostess sighed, grabbed a menu, and led her past tables of laughing elites. She didn't stop near the window view. She didn't stop under the chandelier. Instead, she pulled out a chair by the swinging kitchen doors, the table everyone avoided. "Here you go," she said flatly, dropping the menu like it was too heavy. A burst of greasy steam rolled out from the kitchen as waiters rushed by, nearly knocking into Elizabeth's chair. At the next table, a woman in diamonds whispered loud enough to be heard. "She doesn't belong here." Her husband chuckled, eyes flicking at Elizabeth with ridicule. Elizabeth sat calmly, folding her hands on the stained linen. Her face revealed nothing. The crowd went back to their chatter. Forks clinked, wine glasses sparkled. No one noticed the janitor who entered from the side hallway. Samuel Reed pushed a battered cleaning cart across the marble floor. Orange uniform, worn boots, calloused hands gripping the mop handle. His posture was too straight for the job, his stride too steady, his gaze too sharp. But to the guests, he was nothing. He stopped at Elizabeth's table to wipe a spill left by another diner. His movements were quiet, precise. As he lowered the tray of supplies, his lips moved just enough for her to catch. "I'm just a janitor," he murmured, "but I see things people like you never do." Elizabeth looked up, startled. His eyes were steady, dark, unreadable. Before she could respond, he slid a crumpled napkin across the table, tucked under the edge of the menu. Then he walked away, mop swaying at his side, vanishing back into the rhythm of the restaurant. Elizabeth hesitated. The napkin was rough against her fingers, still damp from his hands. She unfolded it beneath the shadows of the flickering candle. 4 crooked words scrawled in black ink. "They are poisoning you." Her breath caught. She glanced around the dining room. Waiters laughed with the wealthy, bowing low at every gesture. Wine was poured without question. Plates of steak glistened, served with theatrical precision. At another corner, the manager Victor Lang stood like a king surveying his kingdom. His tailored beige suit gleamed under the lights, his smile slick as oil. He raised a glass with a cluster of foreign investors, then cast a quick look toward Elizabeth's table. Disdain flickered across his face. Elizabeth's fingers tightened on the napkin. Was this some cruel joke, a desperate cry for attention, or something darker? Her mind raced. She owned this restaurant. She built the empire. And yet, here she was, shoved beside the kitchen like trash, holding a warning from a janitor. The kitchen doors banged open again. A waiter rushed out with a plate of rare steak, juices pooling at the edge. The aroma was intoxicating, the kind of meal that cost more than some people's rent. It was placed before her with forced politeness. Elizabeth didn't lift her fork. Her eyes searched the room, chasing shadows. Every clink of silverware felt louder. Every laugh felt sharper. The words on the napkin burned in her mind. "They are poisoning you." Across the room, Samuel was sweeping near the exit. His face betrayed nothing. But when Elizabeth's gaze caught his, he gave the faintest nod, as if daring her to believe. The chandelier light shimmered above, but the room suddenly felt colder. Elizabeth knew one thing. The night would not end with a simple dinner. Elizabeth's hand trembled slightly under the table, the napkin hidden in her palm. Poisoning? The word wouldn't leave her mind. She raised her eyes carefully, watching the staff. A waiter nearly bowed to a banker's family, laughing as if every word were precious. Yet when a delivery man with grease-stained sleeves sat down, the same waiter dropped a chipped glass of water without so much as eye contact. Another server hovered by investors in tailored suits, pouring wine with reverence. Moments later, she shoved a plate toward an older woman in a faded dress, muttering something cruel under her breath. The older woman pretended not to hear, lowering her eyes in shame. Elizabeth's chest tightened. She knew humiliation well, but she had never worn it so openly. Tonight she felt it, the sting of being unseen. Her gaze shifted to Samuel. He was at the far end of the room, wiping down an empty table. His movements were unhurried, precise, almost ritualistic. Not once did he look her way. To anyone else, he was simply doing his job. But then, a small moment. A fork clattered from a tray onto the floor. No one noticed. Samuel bent down, picked it up, and instead of tossing it aside, he polished it carefully with his rag. He set it back on the tray, cleaner than before, his face calm and unreadable. Elizabeth caught her breath. It wasn't for her benefit. It was who he was, someone who refused to let filth remain, even if no one cared. Her doubt deepened. Had she imagined that warning? The man looked like he could spend a lifetime scrubbing floors without ever speaking. Yet that single act whispered of conviction. The laughter from wealthy tables swelled, clinking glasses echoing like mockery. Elizabeth lowered her eyes to the words scrawled on the napkin. Her pulse pounded, every detail sharpened, the oily sheen on a plate nearby, the too perfect smiles reserved for power, the casual cruelty dealt to the weak. Samuel wrung out a cloth, steady as stone. Still no glance, no signal, only silence. And in that silence, Elizabeth realized he had already told her everything. The rest she would have to see for herself. The steak arrived on a silver plate, its aroma rich and heavy. A young waiter set down the cutlery, but Elizabeth noticed immediately. The knife was streaked, the spoon dulled with dried stains. Her status gave her every right to snap, to summon the manager, to shame the staff. Yet instead, she reached for the linen at her side. With calm precision, she wiped each piece clean, polishing until the metal caught the chandelier light. The young waiter froze, his face draining of color. I'm so sorry," he stammered, fear flashing in his eyes. Others had been fired for less. Elizabeth's lips curved in a gentle smile. "Don't worry, everyone makes mistakes." Her voice was soft, almost maternal. She placed the utensils neatly, as if nothing had happened. The boy blinked, astonished. He bowed quickly and hurried away, shoulders lighter than when he'd approached. From across the room, Samuel watched. His mop slowed, then stilled. He had seen countless guests explode over the smallest imperfection. Men who threw plates, women who hurled insults. He had seen cruelty dressed as entitlement more times than he could count. But this woman, dressed plainly, shoved near the kitchen doors, whispered about as if she were less than dirt. She had chosen grace over fury. Something shifted in his gaze. The guarded steel in his eyes softened, revealing a flicker of respect. His grip on the mop handle loosened, and for the first time that night, he truly looked at her. Elizabeth, still unaware of his stare, adjusted her napkin and lifted her glass. Her movements carried the quiet dignity of someone who refused to be diminished, even in the face of disdain. Samuel's jaw tightened. This was not a woman to be dismissed, not a woman blind to the rot hidden beneath polished surfaces. She had patience where others had pride, compassion where others had venom, and for the first time in years, he felt the stir of something he had buried long ago: trust. Elizabeth closed the polished menu and spoke with quiet clarity. "I'll have the prime ribeye." "Medium rare," the young waiter scribbled quickly, his hand still shaky from her unexpected kindness. He nodded and rushed toward the kitchen, relieved that her calm smile had spared him humiliation. Elizabeth settled back in her chair. Choosing the most expensive cut was deliberate. She wanted to taste what this empire claimed as its crown jewel. If there was truth hidden in Samuel's warning, the steak itself would reveal it. Across the room, Victor Lang laughed too loudly at a table surrounded by investors. His beige suit was spotless, his gold cufflinks flashing whenever he raised his glass. He carried himself like royalty, in his own palace, yet his eyes were everywhere. Every flick of his fingers sent signals to the staff. Pour more wine here, ignore that guest there, hurry the pace at another table. The waiters moved like puppets under invisible strings. Their smiles widened when Victor looked their way, their shoulders stiffened when his brow furrowed. Samuel, pushing his cart near the service station, never stopped watching. He had seen Victor before, seen the charm, the practiced warmth, the way he could slice a man down with a single glance when no one important was looking. Tonight, nothing had changed. Victor laughed with the wealthy, barked at the staff, and controlled the room without ever leaving his chair. Elizabeth lifted her glass of water. Through the reflection, she caught Victor's eyes on her. A flicker of recognition did not appear, only contempt. He looked at her table by the kitchen doors, lips curling with amusement. A guest dressed so simply, daring to order the restaurant's most expensive steak, was nothing more than a nuisance in his eyes. He whispered something to a nearby waiter, who smirked before hurrying off. Victor then turned back to his guests, raising his glass high, his laughter swelling once again. Elizabeth set her glass down, heartbeat steady. She had built companies, negotiated with governments, and faced boardrooms filled with sharks. Yet the way Victor dismissed her, as if she were beneath even his cruelty, stung more sharply than the whispers of the other diners. Samuel's gaze shifted between them. He saw Victor's arrogance as clearly as Elizabeth's restraint. Two worlds colliding without either speaking a word. The manager who thought he owned the room, and the woman who refused to be broken by it. Samuel's mop dragged across the marble floor, water streaking like shadows. He remembered years ago when Victor's gestures had ruined lives with equal ease. Tonight, watching Elizabeth face that same disdain, yet refuse to bend, Samuel felt a decision forming inside him. The steak would arrive soon. Elizabeth would eat, unaware of what had been altered in the kitchen or who had given the orders, and Victor would smile, convinced of his untouchable power. But Samuel had already seen too much. He tightened his grip on the mop handle, eyes steady on Victor, as if silently promising that this night would not end the way Victor expected. Elizabeth unfolded the crumpled napkin once more under the table. 4 crooked words stared back at her. "They are poisoning you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. She would not walk away, not now. Elizabeth's fingers rested on the napkin hidden in her lap. The ink had smeared slightly from her grip, but the warning was still clear enough to rattle her. She stared at the crisp white tablecloth, her mind a storm. One part of her wanted to laugh it off. Perhaps it was a prank by a bitter employee. Perhaps Samuel was unstable, searching for attention. She could finish her steak, leave, a polite tip, and walk away. That would be the safe, sensible choice. But the thought gnawed at her. What if it wasn't nonsense? She had built her empire on instincts, on sensing when numbers hid lies, when smiles covered betrayal, when silence spoke louder than words. Those instincts were whispering now, warning her that something in this restaurant was rotten beneath the polished surface. Her eyes moved across the room. The staff still performed their rehearsed dance, bowing to the wealthy, ignoring the ordinary. Victor Lang raised another toast, his laughter booming over the clinking of glasses. Yet every so often, his gaze flicked toward her table, sharp as a blade. Elizabeth straightened her back, hiding the turmoil inside. She could feel the weight of her disguise pressing down. Tonight she wasn't the powerful CEO. She was just another overlooked woman shoved near the kitchen. And because of that, she was finally seeing what had always been hidden in plain sight. Her pulse quickened. She folded the napkin once, then again, tucking it deep into her bag, as if sealing a pact with herself. She would not walk away. The waiter returned with her steak, steam rising from the plate. The meat glistened under the chandelier, seasoned to perfection. But Elizabeth didn't lift her fork. She studied the dish, suspicion coiling tighter with every passing second. She pushed the plate aside gently, her decision already made. If Samuel's words carried even a fragment of truth, then eating it would be reckless. Elizabeth rose from her seat. The conversations around her barely faltered. No one cared when a plain woman stood from the worst table in the house. Yet each step she took felt heavier, more deliberate. Her gaze found Samuel near the hallway, emptying a bucket into the utility sink. He didn't look up, didn't beckon her, didn't move at all, but somehow she knew he was waiting. Elizabeth's hands curled into fists at her sides. She was no stranger to risk, but this was different. No contract, no negotiation, no boardroom battle. This was personal, her life, her reputation, and perhaps something even larger. She drew a breath, steadying herself. The choice was clear: remain in comfort and ignorance, or follow the thread into darkness. Elizabeth walked towards Samuel, and with that step, her quiet dinner became the beginning of war. Samuel didn't speak as Elizabeth reached him. He parked the cart by the staff corridor and pushed through a metal door with his shoulder. Heat and detergent smells fell away to a humming hallway, compressors thudding behind the walls. "Cold rooms this way," he said. "If you're wrong, no one gets fired," she answered. "If you're right, everyone does." He swiped a key card, then waited. Frost breathed out as the door swung. Stainless walls, stacked pallets, a single buzzing bulb. Boxes of ribeye and sirloin sat in wrap, lot stickers gleaming. He handed her thin gloves. "Touch as little as you can. Show me." Samuel peeled back plastic on the top pallet. A label read, "Greyfoot Prime, Plant 2276, Lot K4-78. The next box, Greyfoot Prime, Plant 2276, Lot K4-7B. Same font, almost. Not quite. "Spelling drift," Elizabeth said. "Counterfeiters love cousins," he replied. "Close enough to pass a glance. Wrong underlight." He lifted the corner of the label to the bulb. A faint rectangle hid beneath. The ghost of another sticker cut smaller. The glue gave easily. Under it lay a darker label, the plant number clear. 1189. Different facility. Different state. "Relabeled after receiving?" she asked. "Or before. Depends who wants the trail to look clean." He split the tape on one box. Inside, vacuum-sealed stakes shone like rubies under film. Along the seal, a ripple shimmered, heat warp. "They tampered warm," Samuel said, "or they hid the break well." "How many pallets arrived this week?" "Too many." He tugged a clipboard from the rack. The manifest listed deliveries from Northstone Provision LLC, a strip mall suite address. "Northstone isn't approved," Elizabeth said. "Check the invoices." A banker's box on a shelf held clipped stacks. The sheets were aligned, stamped with a signature block that made her stomach drop. Her name, replicated by an auto-approval that should never touch meat vendors. Prices sat 2% under market, enough to dodge audits. The federal inspection number was misaligned, typed onto a scanned template. A faint line cut the logo like a cracked riverbed. "Ghost Company," Samuel said. "Looks right until you look hard." Elizabeth paged faster. Lot numbers failed to march. They skipped. A Tuesday lot reappeared. Thursday, with its last two characters, altered. Handwritten corrections dotted the margins in the same neat slant. Initials V.L. Victor, she whispered. Samuel's jaw set. He signs what he thinks no one else will read. They moved deeper. A second pallet bore a different brand, yet the shrink wrap showed identical tiers, as if the same hurried hands wrapped both stacks. An odor, cleaner than rot, sharper than herb, designed to mask, not perfume. Elizabeth lifted a vacuum pack without breaking the seal. "Coriander. Clove hides sour," Samuel said. "Dress a tired batch in spice and sell the story as marinade." He pointed at a thermal printer bolted to the wall. The interface belonged to internal pastry labeling software, never meant for meat. The bin beneath held curls of backing paper and a knot of misprints. He fished out a strip, Greyfoot Prime, 2276, K4-7. "Practice runs," he said. She set the strip beside an invoice. The fonts were siblings, not twins. "This isn't sloppiness. It's choreography." A clatter echoed from the hall. Voices drifted past, laughter flaring then fading. Samuel slipped a battered ledger from behind the printer. Entries alternated between neat blocks and hurried scrawl. Some pages were damp, clearly wiped and rewritten. Receiving weights missed storage totals by whole cases. "If the numbers don't balance," he said, "the missing pounds went somewhere. out the back or onto plates. Elizabeth turned a transfer slip. Northstone shipped to Grayford, Grayford shipped to the restaurant, bypassing corporate procurement. Arrows looped across the page like a magician's flourish. "This isn't one bad crate," she said. "It's a corridor." "A manufactured one," Samuel replied. "Looks legitimate from outside." Cold tightened around them. In her mind, investors in tailored suits raised glasses to Victor's charm, while a counterfeit river ran beneath their feet. She slid the ledger into her bag. "Who else knows?" she asked. "People who know don't keep jobs," Samuel said. "People who suspect learn to look away." "Then we stop looking away." He studied her as if weighing a lifetime of disappointments against this steady voice. Something in his eyes unlocked. He nodded once. "There's more, but it isn't on paper." "Where?" "On the floor," he said, "in how they move when they think no one's watching. In dishes they push hardest. In orders rerouted after midnight, Elizabeth tightened her gloves. Then we start with what we can hold." She lifted a bottom-row box. The cardboard bowed. On the underside, a rectangle was cut and retaped, an access flap. Samuel slid a pocket knife along the seam and lifted the panel. Beneath a false bottom lay a sleeve stacked with pre-printed labels. Plant codes, lots, brand names ready to stick. Elizabeth stared at the sleeve, the counterfeit trail condensed into one artifact. "The chain was never broken," she said softly. "It was rewritten." The bulb hummed louder. Beyond the steel, music and laughter swelled. Two worlds again, divided by a door and a lie. Samuel resealed the box, eyes hard. "Now you know what you're up against." She tucked the sleeve beside the ledger. "Good," she said. "Now we make it visible." Maria Torres had a habit of hearing problems before they made a sound. At 11:47 p.m., with headquarters a grid of dark windows, she stared at a procurement console, insisting nothing was wrong, while the ledger in her inbox said otherwise. She ran a reconciliation script she had written for nights like this. Purchase orders marched neatly, until they didn't. A vendor code, Northstone P, appeared 6 times in a month despite never passing onboarding. The workflow field read, Auto Approve, EC, Elizabeth's initials. Impossible. She checked timestamps. Approvals fired between 2:03 and 2:18 a.m., always on Thursdays, from a static IP assigned to the restaurant group, not corporate. The user agent didn't match Elizabeth's machine. Whoever built the rule knew how easily the familiar is trusted. She compared flagged shipments to intake logs. Receiving weights were lighter than amounts paid by a pattern. 2 cases short per pallet, a skim just low enough to dodge audit thresholds. Those same weeks, Victor Lang's location posted improbable food cost wins. Someone had threaded a needle through their systems and sewn a ghost road straight into the cold room for quiet theft. Her phone lit, a message from Elizabeth. "At the restaurant. I have a ledger you need to see." Maria hesitated. Staff whispers said the CEO had been seen with a janitor, Samuel. If a scam lived in-house, a desperate employee was the easiest villain. Janitors had keys. They saw everything. No one listened to them. "Bring it to HQ," she typed, then deleted. "I'm coming to you." She grabbed her coat and the key fob 3 executives had. She called Ops for RFID door logs. The list arrived. Samuel Reed accessed the service corridor nightly at shift change. Unremarkable. Victor, though, had badge pings at 1:50 a.m. on weeks when Northstone invoices cleared, 10 minutes before the approvals fired. At the restaurant, Elizabeth handed a grease-smudged ledger and a sleeve of pre-printed labels. Plant codes like stamps cracked Maria's skepticism. Pages alternated between meticulous block print and hurried corrections marked VL. "Samuel found these," Elizabeth said. Maria's guard rose. "And Samuel is... what? A whistleblower who scrubs floors by day?" "He's the reason I looked." He risked his job to warn me. Maria flipped to receiving pages. Transfer slips looped product from Northstone to Grayford to store, bypassing corporate procurement. Thermal label misprints matched the brand stickers. On the company, VPN, 2 lot numbers reappeared 48 hours later with altered suffixes. "If he planted this, he's a genius," she murmured. "Then why leave printer scraps? Why repeat Thursdays?" "Because he didn't plant it," Elizabeth said evenly. Maria reopened the RFID export. A second credential surfaced on a handful of the same nights. Facilities Master Override, used for maintenance emergencies. Holder this quarter, Victor Lang. "He's routing around procurement and forging approvals in your name," Maria said. "He's also laundering shrink as marinade. The clove and coriander on those vacuum seals. It's a mask." Elizabeth nodded. "Can you prove it without exposing Samuel?" "Yes, I'll set an integrity trap," Maria typed as she spoke. "Quarantine the vendor in the back end, but leave the UI unchanged. When the next auto-approval hits, it will fail silently and trigger a shadow log. If Victor pushes a manual override from the store IP, we capture the credential hash and the time delta to the RFID door." 2 signals, same night, she closed the ledger. The contempt she'd held for the janitor drained away, replaced by reluctant respect, and a thin thread of anger at the man who counted on her not to look. "All right," she said, meeting Elizabeth's eyes. "Your janitor just earned a provisional ally." Dr. Allen. Brooks lived above the old clinic on River Street. He opened before Samuel could knock twice. Gray hair back, sleeves rolled, the gaze of a man who'd spent decades reading danger, others called minor. "You look tired," Brooks said. "I brought something worse than fatigue." On the kitchen table, Samuel set a sleeve of counterfeit labels, photos of the cold room, and a sealed steak pulled from a split case. Brooks cleaned the plastic with alcohol, then lifted the film to the window. "See that ripple?" he asked. "Heat-warped polymer. Someone broke the seal and tried to reseal. Warm," he slid on a loop and traced the inspection code. "Plant 1189. His mouth hardened. "That facility was shuttered after a cluster of 0157 and listeria positives. Consent decree, 3 years back. You're sure it's the same plant? They rebranded twice, but codes don't lie. Regulators say, once remediated, always safe, but money is quicker than bleach." He tapped the label. "Where did you get this?" Samuel told him about relabeled boxes, the thermal printer, Victor's corrections, and the ghost vendor that slid through approvals at 2 a.m. Brooks listened without interrupting. His face did not change then. "Clove and coriander?" Brooks asked. "Every suspect palette." "Classic cover for sour fat, masks volatile compounds and convinces chefs they ordered a signature rub." He pointed to the seam. "I can swab for ATP, not definitive for pathogens, but it will show if someone handled the product after sealing." He swabbed. The reading spiked. "High residue," he said. "Not normal for factory-sealed meat. This was touched, wiped, touched again. Cold chain lies. Bacteria don't." A file cabinet groaned open. Brooks pulled a folded bulletin, a state recall notice with plant 1189 circled in red. "They lost cooling to a blast chiller, several hospitalizations. No deaths, so the story faded. I kept the paper because silence bothered me." Samuel's jaw tightened. "Victor's moving product from that pipeline into Elizabeth's flagship. He thinks the room obeys him. Room or no room, illness doesn't care about status." Brooks studied him. "You know what you're risking." "I already lost my first career by choosing the right risk. I'm not repeating the wrong one." Brooks's expression softened. "Then you'll need chain of custody. Photos with timestamps, the label sleeve, the ledger, independent verification on lot histories." He scribbled an address. "A state lab director still returns my calls. She won't stall if it looks political." The front door creaked. Elizabeth stepped in, Maria behind her with a laptop under her arm. Brooks nodded at them, then at the evidence spread like a map. Elizabeth spoke first. "Tell me I'm not feeding danger to my guests." "You are being made to," Brooks said, "by a supply chain rewritten in your name." Maria set the laptop on the table. "RFID and approval logs align with nights Victor was in the building." Brooks folded the recall notice and slid it toward Elizabeth. "This ties your product to a facility that should never touch your menus. I'll file a confidential inquiry, but you move now, quietly, pull the highest risk lots without broadcasting why. Collect, don't accuse. He looked to Samuel. And you, don't be a hero alone. Samuel nodded once. I brought a team. Brooks allowed a rare smile. Good. Then bring light. Victor Lang felt the room tilt the moment routine stopped. A server said the plain woman at the worst table ordered the priciest steak and never took a bite. Victor smiled for show, then walked to his office behind the wine wall and opened the hidden screens. He pulled private feeds. There she was, cardigan, scuffed flats, posture that didn't match the shoes. There he was, the janitor, Samuel Reed, cart sliding into the staff corridor a minute after she stood. Frame by frame, Victor traced them toward the cold hallway, then into a blind pocket where a broken camera waited. The dead angle irked him. Dead angles invited stories. Stories ruined profit, reputation, and sleep. Evan, he said into the mic. The shift supervisor answered. Flag the woman if she returns. Quietly. I want a name and anything staff remembers. Hostess says cash at the bar. No reservation, no record, Evan said. People with no record are either ghosts or executives, Victor replied. He stepped onto the floor. He watched Samuel reappear, expressionless, movements efficient enough to look natural. Too efficient. Almost rehearsed, almost a tell. Text me when he takes break, Victor told Evan. If he speaks off rotation, I want video. In his tablet's console, door logs ticked by. The cold room showed 2 late accesses. Samuel's badge fit one, the other read, Facilities Master Override. The skeleton key Victor kept for himself. Overlap made patterns, patterns drew auditors. He closed the window and bought insulation. Champagne for table 6, soufflé for the banker's kids, lights lowered to soften edges. Then he planted eyes. A runner idled by the corridor. The hostess with the floral tattoo posted near the service stairs. He sent the dishwasher on a brake that steered past the linen closet and utility sink. Samuel moved like he'd mapped the building in his bones. He took stairs instead of the elevator, let the dishwasher drift ahead, paused to retie a mop head, and surfaced 2 doors away with a full bucket. The tail returned empty-handed. He met the plain woman near the restrooms. Up close, her cardigan was too deliberate, her eyes too calm. Everything to your liking? He asked, smiling with teeth. Almost, she said. Something is off. Hard to name, he chuckled. We'll make it right. She carried a sealed takeout box, the untouched steak. She tested the adhesive as if the seal were evidence. Victor's chuckle cooled. First time dining with us? First time like this, she answered, and left him with an echo he didn't enjoy. Back in the office, he dialed a number he never saved under the truth. Darian, he said, when the line clicked. 2 shadows, a woman who plays invisible, a janitor who plays dumb. Tonight. Locations, company, habits. Across town, a black sedan watched a second-floor light on River Street. The driver photographed Samuel entering a retired clinic, then the woman arriving with another figure carrying a laptop. Images flew to Victor's phone. Time-stamped, geo-tagged, neat. He enlarged Samuel's shoulders. Not a custodian's slump, something steadier. Respect threaded with irritation moved through him. He preferred obedient, but he worked best against clever. At headquarters, Maria Torres saw different shadows. New pings brushing her quarantine like moths testing glass. Someone probed the vendor gate and failed quietly. She set alerts and texted Elizabeth. He's sniffing. Victor shifted to pressure. He announced a dawn safety audit. Lockers opened, bags inspected, updated policies signed. Cleanliness was the pretext. Fear was the tool. Fear made talkers. Evan hovered. What exactly are we hunting? Drafts, Victor said. Leaks. People who forget which way the current flows. And if there's nothing? There's always something, Victor answered. Rain began pattering over the skylight, steady, folding the room into a patient hush. Victor let the sound settle his guests. In the quiet, he planned tomorrow. A staged spill to see who runs where. A friendly inspector on speed dial. a reminder to the hostess with the floral tattoo that over time disappears when loyalty does. By closing, he had lists, photos, and a plan. Still, when he replayed the woman's measured gaze and the janitor's vanishing act, a shard of unease caught under his skin. He welcomed it. Unease sharpened the blade. Rain fell in soft sheets, turning the parking lot into trembling mirrors. Sodium lights buzzed. Elizabeth stood under the side exit awning, coat pulled tight, the sealed box tucked under one arm. Samuel pushed through with an empty cart, shoulders damp, boots squeaking. He didn't glance at her. Across the lot, a black sedan idled with its lights off. 2 silhouettes sat inside. 3 o'clock, Elizabeth murmured. I see them, Samuel said. 2 servers burst outside laughing. When the noise faded, Samuel stepped from the awning and walked with the unhurried cadence of someone who never hurried. Elizabeth fell half a step behind, head lowered. He angled the cart toward the maintenance shed and parked it. Keys? She asked. In my pocket, he said, but not yet. The sedan's passenger cracked the door, then closed it. Samuel veered toward the covered stairwell to the lower level. They only see a janitor and an ordinary woman, he said. We're invisible, as long as we step at the right time. Footfalls echoed above as another group spilled from the restaurant. Samuel folded their descent into the noise. On the next landing, he paused. Rubber soles whispered from the upper level, someone trailing carefully. They reached the second deck, where puddles gathered in wide black plates. A camera blinked red. Samuel hugged the beam's edge. Another pair of headlights swept along the ramp. Victor had sent more than one set of eyes. Which car? Elizabeth asked. Mine's dead center, he said, nodding at a dented grey sedan. Yours is safer where they expect you to run. Meaning? Meaning we touch neither. They cut left, toward a maintenance gate chained with a rusted lock. Samuel twisted the chain once, and the lock dropped into his palm. Shaved long ago for emergencies no one else tracked, he slipped them through and relocked it, rain covering the clink. Beyond, a narrow service lane sloped toward the street. The air carried a tang of bleach and cloves. The follower turned the corner above, framed in stairwell light, checking his phone. Samuel quickened without rushing. Turn your face, he said. No clean profile. Elizabeth angled her head and tightened her grip on the box. At the lane's end, a keypad guarded a rolling gate. Samuel typed 4 digits. Nothing. They're learning, she said. They're testing. He popped a panel and bridged 2 wires with a coin. Sparks snapped, the gate shuddered, and a gap opened just wide enough for a person. They slipped through. Tires hissed on wet asphalt. A bus sighed to a stop across the way. Samuel shook his head. Too bright. Cameras, a rideshare, coasted up with a glowing logo. Predictable, he scanned for something the eye slides past. There, he said, nodding at a delivery van beside a closed florist. The driver smoked under a narrow awning, scrolling his screen. Samuel walked straight over. Back entrance jammed, he told the driver, tired and friendly. Mind if we shelter 5 minutes? The man shrugged. Doors open. Don't drip on the boxes they climbed in. Samuel slid the side door almost closed, leaving a finger's width for sight and sound. The follower reached the lane exit and scanned the street, phone to his ear. He looked past the bus, past the rideshare, past the florist, eyes skimming the van because delivery vans live everywhere. Elizabeth's pulse hammered. She glanced at the box and thought of the lab report that could not be argued. A second shadow joined the first. They split, one north, one south. Samuel waited until their shapes dissolved into rain. He tapped the driver's shoulder. Thanks, saved me a write-up. Don't make a habit, the man said. They stepped back into the weather. A taxi's top light blinked at the corner. Samuel raised a hand, and it drifted over. They slid into the back seat. Surface streets, Samuel said. Avoid the freeway. The driver nodded, wipers thudding time. The city blurred between beads of water. Samuel kept his face in shadow. Elizabeth tucked the box beneath her legs like a child hiding a secret. At the first light, a black sedan eased up 2 lanes over. The passenger turned, searching. Samuel touched Elizabeth's wrist. barely there. "Look at me if he looks at you," he murmured. "Confidence reads as familiarity." Familiarity is camouflage. The light changed. The taxi slipped into side streets, cut behind a theater with a blinking marquee. The sedan chose speed and lost them at the next turn. Only when the river of taillights fell behind did Samuel exhale. "We bought an hour." "Enough to move product and lock logs?" Elizabeth asked. "Enough to choose the next step." She watched the gutters ripple with city light, then looked back at him. "Then step," she said. He nodded. "We will. When they expect us least." The taxi stopped at headquarters, rain threading off the awning. Elizabeth carried the box. Samuel held the label sleeve and ledger. Maria met them at the private elevator. "Logs caught a probe at 2:11 a.m., she said, as the doors slid shut. "Quarantine held. If he pushes manual again, we'll have his signature." Evidence stacked neatly in Elizabeth's hands, the ledger with VL, the counterfeit labels, the invoices that routed around procurement. "This is enough," she said. "We move on compliance now. Suspend Victor, seize the cold rooms, call an emergency board meeting." Samuel didn't step forward when the elevator opened. "It looks perfect," he said quietly. "That's what worries me." "Perfect?" "Ledger with his initials, invoices that scream forgery. Victor is arrogant, not careless. If it's this loud, he wants someone to find it." "Or he assumed no one would look," Maria countered. "Or he's curating what we find," Samuel said. "Staged breadcrumbs lead you where he's ready." Elizabeth set the box on Maria's desk. "We have plant codes tied to a shuttered facility," she said. "Lot numbers that change midweek, door logs, and a story he can flip," Samuel replied. "A janitor meddles with seals. A rogue assistant misconfigures approvals. A concerned CEO overreacts on rumor. He throws Northstone under the bus and calls the rest a misunderstanding." Maria opened the ledger to receiving pages. The handwriting alternated, meticulous then hurried. "It's real work," she said. "If he staged this, it took time." "That's how you make a trap look like truth," Samuel said. "You bait the pattern, then you accuse the person who found it." Elizabeth's jaw tightened. "We can't sit on this." "I'm not saying sit," Samuel said. "Tighten. Chain of custody on the stake. Independent lab for the plant code link. A live capture of the auto-approval failing and the manual override firing from his terminal." Then, no room to pivot, Maria slid a form toward Elizabeth. "Integrity trap is set. The next Thursday window is in 42 hours. If he follows habit, we record the override and the door swipe under the same minute." 42 hours while guests eat, Elizabeth said. Brooks had warned them to collect, not accuse. The thought of another plate carrying a dressed-up risk turned her stomach. She called the operations director. "Quietly pull the highest-risk lots tonight," she ordered. "Replace with certified inventory." "No memos. If anyone asks, it's a rotation test." She hung up and faced Samuel. "We still move. Compliance at sunrise." Maria hesitated. "If he smells it, he'll burn the trail." "Then we move faster," Elizabeth said. "These approvals carry my name. I'm not letting him write my signature over danger." Samuel looked at the box, then at her steady hands. "I believe you," he said. "Believe me back." "I do." "Then hear this once. Don't trust what's too easy to find." Silence gathered like the rain outside. The sentence felt right and unbearable at once. Still, with or without the trap, with or without perfect proof, she couldn't leave the night to spin. They divided the work. Maria prepared a sealed evidence log and photographed each item. Samuel documented the chain. Where found, by whom, under what condition. Elizabeth drafted a notice to the board's audit chair, requesting an emergency session of vendor anomalies and food safety. For a moment, momentum felt like victory. She could see it. Victor confronted with labels and ledgers. Counsel asking questions. The chain snapped and replaced with one she trusted. Samuel watched that image form and knew the danger. false certainty made good people step too early. He gathered his jacket. "I'll sweep the restaurant perimeter," he said. "If he planted a second story, it lives where the cameras blink." Elizabeth pressed the elevator button. The doors closed on a plan that seemed airtight. Maria's phone buzzed. An alert flashed. "Unknown admin, created, user group, compliance read-only, scope, vendor records." "Who gave red access at midnight?" Elizabeth asked. "No one," Maria said, "unless someone expects a visit and is staging a spotless room." Certainty thinned. They had enough, or almost enough to act, or enough to be led. Elizabeth reached for the evidence box, feeling its weight shift like a promise she couldn't yet cash. Maria sat alone in the glass-walled war room, screens dimmed to night mode. The quarantine she'd built held steady, but something else was moving, subtle, patient, shaving history, a row at a time. A procurement table refreshed, a week vanished, another refresh, a vendor note collapsed to null. Deletions were staggered across clusters, never the same node twice. She traced the calls. They didn't come through the vendor app. They tunneled in from a privileged service account she hadn't created. SVCARCIVERTR. The permission set claimed read only. The audit trail said otherwise. At 12:06 a.m., the account wrote a policy update to the retention bucket and relabeled cleanup as legal hold. Elizabeth stepped in, hair damp from the rain. "What changed?" "Central data is thinning," Maria said. "Vendor records, transfer slips, lot histories. Not gone all at once, sanded down. Whoever's doing it knows what will trigger alerts and what won't." She mirrored the traffic to a dark collector and fired a snapshot job. The next delete attempt struck a decoy and etched its own signature. Source: HQ Network. Floor: 9. VLAN tag that belonged to enterprise systems. "Someone inside," Elizabeth said. "Someone with keys," Maria answered. She pulled badge telemetry. 3 people had swiped into the server wing after midnight. A night custodian on schedule, a network contractor with a temporary credential, and Elliot Grant, Director of Data Governance. Elizabeth's jaw tightened. "Elliot reports to the CIO. He chairs the records committee." "And he just pushed a schema patch that demoted vendor adj to a non-audited field," Maria said. "That makes retro edits look like routine normalization. If you investigate tomorrow, you'll find clean screens and no story." She opened a secure channel and captured keystrokes from the account session. Commands flowed with professional caution: export a slice, rewrite metadata, re-ingest with new GUIDs, no brute force, no slop. The cursor hesitated only once, over a table labeled Northstone_link. Then the row count dipped by 4. Elizabeth paced once, then stopped. "We confront him now. If we spook him, he'll zero the staging queue and purge the job history," Maria said. "Give me 2 minutes." She laid the trap. A rule promoted Northstone link to immutable storage, but only when accessed by SVC archive RTR from a device fingerprint matching Elliot's laptop. The next edit forked automatically. 1 stream to Elliot's view, 1 to an off-grid vault, both timestamped and notarized. On screen, the service account reached again. The rule fired. A silent capture locked the before and after. Simultaneously, the building's access logs recorded Elliot's badge ping at the server door, and 90 seconds later, a session from his office IP. The elevator chimed. Maria didn't look up. "Call security." Quietly, ask them to walk the floor outside enterprise systems and stay visible, Elizabeth dialed. "How long has Elliot sat in the middle of this?" "Long enough to know where audits blink," Maria said. She opened an archived resume. 5 years ago, Elliot had shared a project with Victor Lang on a restaurant chain, migrating its POS to the cloud. A footnote, but the kind that lives like a seed. The cursor on Maria's screen moved faster. Elliot had noticed something. The deletion stream paused, then shifted to vendor contacts. He purged phone numbers and billing addresses, unthreading the people from the paper. The compliance read-only group he had created at midnight now watched innocently as the history died. Maria pushed a final lever. A honey record mimicked a Northstone lot, complete with forged approvals and a plant code tied to the shuttered facility. Any attempt to alter it would staple Elliot's device ID to the immutable vault and email legal with a sealed digest. The account fell for it. A delete fired, then a raindex. The vault pinged. Legal received the digest. Maria exhaled. Elizabeth read the alert on her phone. "We have him." "By name and title," Maria said. "Elliot Grant, Director of Data Governance. He's our insider." "Why would he protect Victor?" "Money, fear, or debt," Maria said. "Or habit. Some people live to make dangerous things look tidy." Footsteps approached. Security took position at the end of the hall. Elizabeth straightened. Inside her, fury cooled into purpose. "Bring him in," she said. "Right now." Security walked Elliot Grant down the hall. Maria went to legal. Elizabeth and Samuel waited in a small conference room. Elizabeth said, "When this ends, I want no doubt left standing." Samuel folded his hands. "Doubt saved me once. Tell me." "I was a food safety engineer," he said. "Midwestern plants, long drives, cold rooms. My job looked dull. Records, swabs, temperatures, chain of custody, the kind of dull that keeps children out of hospitals. One winter, a beef processor, plant 1189, started drifting. ATP spikes, slow coolers, sanitizer that never matched the math. I flagged it, asked for a shutdown and a deep clean. Production said no. Production said, prove it with an outbreak. Compliance said, adjust the sampling plan. Bonuses ride throughput. I wouldn't sign. The night before the executive walk, the data changed. Swabs polished, the chill curve smoothed, the spike erased. My report looked hysterical next to the corrected numbers. "Who changed them?" "Darian Cole," he said. "Back then he was my closest colleague. He could fix a broken freezer with a wrench and a smile, then sell it as innovation. He told me I'd misread noise as signal, told our director I'd lost objectivity. I was suspended for impeding operations." Elizabeth remembered the name from Victor's call. "Darian works for Victor now." "He's orbited men like Victor since he learned charm is currency." After my suspension, a small cluster of illnesses hit counties downriver. Not dozens, just enough for statistics to shrug. The plant remediated and paid a fine. I tried to reopen the case. The company sent me to training. A month later, my badge failed at the gate, terminated. Officially, a restructuring. Unofficially, a warning to anyone who thinks math should slow money. He looked at his hands, calloused by mops rather than pipettes. I couldn't prove the edits, so I learned something else. How to see without being seen. Kitchens hire night cleaners with no questions. Cold rooms don't argue with a man pushing a cart. I followed supply chains from the floor, the labels, the side doors, the rhythm of trucks. The patterns were the same, just quieter. When I saw plant 1189's code riding in again under new names, I knew who wrote the music. And you ended up in my restaurant. Places like yours are trophies for men like Victor. If a rotten corridor can reach marble and chandeliers, it can reach anywhere. I took the shift with the worst pay and the fewest cameras, and waited. She exhaled. All this time, you carried that and scrubbed floors. I carried it because I couldn't carry the alternative. Silence settled. Elizabeth had seen graduates parade through boardrooms. Few spoke about hospitals when profit crowded the table. She looked at him and finally recognized what had bothered her from the first moment. The patience of someone who solves equations nobody wants to face. "You have an engineer's eyes," she said. "I have a janitor's keys," he said. "Tonight we need both." The door opened. Maria entered. Elliot is contained. His edits are mirrored to an immutable vault. He asked for counsel. Elizabeth didn't look away from Samuel. "Now I know why you warned me. The easy story is the dangerous one. And why you were the first person I risked telling." She nodded. We finished this. Rain ticked against the glass. The room held a new alignment, a CEO who refused to be blind, a janitor who refused to be silent, and a past that finally had a witness. Victor didn't wait for morning. Before legal finished seating Elliot in a conference room, an anonymous employee account posted a thread. The CEO had been groomed by a janitor, with fabricated food safety fears to shake down a respected manager. The post came with clipped photos, Elizabeth beside Samuel in a hallway, both faces angled away, the sealed steak box under her arm, a taxi door opening to rain. Within an hour, a tabloid amplified it. Billionaire CEO seen sneaking around with custodian. Insider alleges procurement fraud. The story quoted sources close to operations, who claimed a disgruntled cleaner accessed storerooms and tampered with inventory to stage a scare. Victor appeared as the steady adult caught in a turf war. Bots swarmed company pages. A finance blog called it a governance crisis. When markets opened, the stock sagged, then slid. Commentators reached for phrases Elizabeth had only heard in other people's calamities. Leadership vacuum, credibility event, time for the board to act. Reporters crowded the lobby. PR drafted statements. Nothing sounded true enough to survive the churn. The fact people believed was the photo, a woman near a janitor in the rain. Victor Fedicaitis, The Blaze. He released a to-staff memo that leaked within minutes. In it, he praised employees' commitment to safety, welcomed any fair audit, and lamented recent attempts to weaponize misinformation by individuals outside the chain of command. He didn't use names, he didn't need to. The final line cut cleanly. Our guests deserve protection from panic stoked for personal agendas. By noon, the board chair called emergency session. Some directors spoke about optics, others weren't careful at all. We have a stock to protect, one said. If you want this to be about principle, do it from outside the company. Elizabeth kept her voice level. We have evidence of a manipulated supply chain and an insider deleting records. General Counsel lifted a hand. There is also a narrative that you were manipulated, that you overreached, that you placed the company at risk. We need proof no one can argue with. Do we have it today? Maria described the trap, the vault, the badge logs. Half the grid leaned toward their screens. The rest stared past her into the noise. Someone asked whether the janitor was under investigation. Someone else suggested placing Elizabeth on administrative leave. Victor's allies offered a compromise that wasn't one. Freeze the inquiry in a committee he influenced, pause public statements, restore stability. The chair turned to Elizabeth. If you step back for 48 hours, we can calm the markets. 48 hours would let Victor rearrange the furniture, and Elliot finish sanding the record. Reporters camped outside her glass wall. The HR tip line bloomed with anonymous notes accusing Samuel of lurking near the manager's office and pocketing labels. Screens filled with hashtags, Janitorgate, Board Wake Up, Poison Panic Hoax. Samuel stood in the hall like a fixed point, eyes steady. They only see what they're told to see, he said. It's working. Elizabeth felt the ground tilt. She had fought hostile takeovers and won. This was different. Reputation turned into a weapon. The board recessed and reconvened without inviting her. When the email landed, it was couched as care. In the best interests of the company, the board requests that you delegate day-to-day authority to the COO pending completion of an independent review. Security pinged her badge with a temporary restriction on several floors. PR handed talking points that erased Samuel's name and recast the crisis as a routine audit. Legal advised silence. She stood at the window with the city muttering below and understood the trap. If she accepted the script, Victor would heal publicly while the chain stayed poisoned. If she rejected it, the company could cut her out and say she chose chaos over sense. All is Lost arrived without theatrics. A calendar invite she wasn't on. A floor she could no longer enter. A stock chart turning her phone a color she hadn't seen in years. She closed her eyes and saw 4 crooked words on a napkin. The beginning she hadn't known was a beginning. Then she opened them to the worst part of power, the hour when everyone you lead tells you not to lead. Maria refused to let a rumor write the ending. While pundits recycled a hallway photo and bots pushed hashtags, she built a counterweight out of facts. She opened a public transparency room on the company site, read-only, time-stamped, notarized, and dropped in verifiable artifacts, immutable vault receipts and badge-to-door logs. No names, no blame. Only a clock showing a door swipe at 1:50 a.m., aligned with a manual override at 2:11 a.m., both originating from the same store network. Her note beneath was plain. Here is what the system recorded. Math doesn't pick sides. The link surged through internal chats. Engineers and accountants recognized the patterns and began seeding the thread under loud headlines that had buried nuance. Alan Brooks arrived with rain on his shoulders and a report. "Preliminary, but solid," he said, setting sealed swabs on Elizabeth's desk. "Surface ATP on supposed factory-sealed packs reads high. Volatile analysis shows an abnormal clove coriander spike on lots that should be unseasoned. Chain of custody photos tie these packs to labels linked to plant 1189. The state lab director agreed to fast-track pathogen testing under emergency discretion." Elizabeth read the summary. The language was clinical. Probable post-packaging handling, likely cold chain deviation, spice profile, consistent with masking. Attached sat the recall bulletin for Plant 1189 and a signed statement from Brooks explaining code continuity through rebrands. Facts, not theater. Outside, the stock bled. Inside, directors wrote about optics. Elizabeth turned to Maria. "If I speak now, can you keep the evidence safe from another midnight rewrite?" "It's already mirrored to an independent notary," Maria said. "Any change leaves fingerprints." Alan met Elizabeth's eyes. Silence won't beat innuendo. Sunlight might. Pick the room and set the terms. She stood. PR had a statement that said nothing. Legal warned that naming employees could complicate an investigation. She wanted neither a martyr nor a muzzle. "We talk without names," she said. "We talk about diners, workers, systems, and the lie inside a shiny room." Samuel waited in the doorway, collar still damp. Elizabeth faced him. "If I go out there, I'm taking this fight from conference tables to public ground." He nodded once. "It's time for the truth to step into the light." She chose neutral ground, the public library's community auditorium 2 blocks away. She sent one message to the board. "I will make a factual statement about food safety and systems integrity. You are welcome to attend," and one to staff. "If you have ever felt unseen, you are seen." 30 minutes later, umbrellas and aprons filled the room beside, suits and cameras. Elizabeth walked to an unvarnished lectern without entourage. She began with diners. She spoke of families who trust a plate because safety should be invisible. She spoke of workers who polish what the world sees and carry what it doesn't. Then she described systems, approvals that must mean something, vendors that must be more than post office boxes, logs that must record truth even when truth is inconvenient. She didn't say Victor's name. She didn't need to. She pointed to the screen where Maria's transparency room sat open. Timestamps, badges, device IDs, each explained in plain language. She held up Brooks's summary and the recall bulletin, outlining code persistence in terms a layperson could follow. She announced a voluntary pull of suspect lots across the group, a paid safety stand-down for kitchen teams, and open invitations to state and federal inspectors to walk any site, unescorted and unannounced. "You may ask why I trusted a warning on a crumpled napkin," she said, letting quiet settle. "Because sometimes the people a room ignores are the only ones still looking." Questions flew. Was she being blackmailed? Number. Was she covering a personal relationship? Number. Was she accusing her own managers? She was documenting a pattern, preserving evidence, and promising full cooperation with authorities. Would she step aside? She would step forward, the feed cut into business channels. A respected investigative reporter embedded the transparency link and wrote, "Company releases verifiable artifacts, that undercut rumor narrative. Analysts who had piled on began hedging. The stock's drop slowed. At headquarters, the board chair watched the stream alone. He saw unstaged applause and a chat full of finally. People spilled toward the rain. Alan squeezed Elizabeth's arm. "Science stands taller when it isn't hiding," he said. Maria checked her phone. "The trap just tripped," she whispered. "Manual override from a store terminal 30 miles out. Badge ping at the side door 7 minutes earlier. The vault captured both." Elizabeth felt the first hint of traction after a day of sliding. Not victory, just purchase on a wall built to be smooth. She looked at Samuel. "You bought us time and witnesses," he said. "We'll need both," she answered, stepping toward the doors as the rain thinned to a hush that sounded like calm and steady resolve. The flagship glowed as if nothing could touch it. Chandeliers poured a syrup of gold across marble and glass. Mirrors multiplied the warmth until every face looked flattered. A quartet braided soft standards into the room's pulse. Laughter rose in polished ripples. Crystal stems kissed, silver murmured. The night had the confidence of a photograph already chosen for tomorrow's front page. Victor Lang sat where the cameras could adore him. His suit was champagne, his cufflinks a practiced wink. Around him clustered the international delegation, Zurich precision, Dubai ease, Singapore efficiency, each with a pen in an inner pocket and a spreadsheet behind the smile. Between them lay the contract folder, thick, creamy, ribboned by a brass clip. It promised lanes of buying power and a headline about stability. He lifted his glass. "To partnerships that ignore noise," he said, the phrase engineered to be quotable. The delegation laughed on cue. The board chair, newly calm after a market wobble, allowed himself a small nod. Tonight would replace last week. Staff moved like choreography. Saffron arancini arrived on black slate. Butter-poached lobster curved beside lemon confit. Ribeyes bled a theatrical blush. The worst table had been erased by a tower of lilies and a tasteful lectern. Lighting designers had tuned the room to a flattery no rumor could puncture. Behind the sheen, pressure hissed. The hostess with the floral tattoo kept a smile sharp enough to cut line jumpers. Security shaped traffic with shoulders. PR drifted, checking angles, feeding captions to the hungry. A pair of influencers rehearsed surprise. In the kitchen, heat thrummed. Tickets rattled. A sous chef reset a towel again and again, hunting steadiness by ritual. By the utility sink, Samuel wrung a mop and studied the clock. He wore invisibility like a credential. A night cleaner may cross any border if he carries a bucket and looks bored. He mapped exits, counted heads, and marked who watched the door and who pretended not to. Maria and Alan were 2 blocks away in a borrowed room, screens stacked like palisades. On one, immutable hashes scrolled, proof against midnight edits. On another, a monitor waited for the next override the trap would catch. "If he inks that deal," Alan said, "optics harden." Maria didn't look up. "Evidence hardens harder," she answered, and armed another capture. Victor steered the table with the ease of a river finding its banks. He told a story about resilience, skipped names, and replaced doubt with volume. He praised chefs, tradition, and the mathematics of consistency. Every sentence slid toward the signature page. Cameras crept closer. The quartet softened to an obliging hush. The delegation patted inside pockets, confirming pens. The board chair fanned the contract as if drying fresh paint. A photographer adjusted aperture, hunting gold. Victor signaled a pause for ceremony. He stood. Applause rolled like warm surf. "Excellence travels," he said. "Tonight so will we." He opened the folder and revealed the signature tab, a tiny flag waiting for allegiance. The pen he had chosen, black lacquer, gold nib, gleamed like the point of a small, polite spear. A server skimmed by, topping glasses while pretending not to hear the word inevitable. Somewhere near the bar, a chair scraped, then stilled. Outside the cordon, the lobby swelled with faces pressed to the threshold of privilege. Samuel tracked the sound of shoe leather, the rhythm of radios, the code words security used when they wanted to speak without speaking. He shifted his bucket 2 inches, a move insignificant enough to be everywhere and nowhere. The kitchen clock clicked forward a minute. He counted down from 30, then reset. Victor glanced at the board chair. A look passed between them. Sign, smile, exhale. He dipped the pen to the line and hovered with theatrical patience, letting cameras bloom. In the hallway beyond the private dining doors, air changed, the way a room does when weather approaches. A guard spoke into his cuff and pivoted toward the entrance. The hostess straightened. The quartet's cellist, hearing a cue that was not musical, lifted his eyes. Victor kept the smile. He was a man who finished what he began. Another second burned. The pen still hovered. The golden light seemed to lean forward with everyone else, eager to be reflected in the curl of his signature. One heartbeat more, and the hinge of the night would decide which story the room remembered. Rain slid down the street-side windows, in glittering threads. Somewhere a door closer sighed. The maitre d' glanced toward the vestibule, and then back to Victor, uncertain which sun to orbit. A hush gathered that no toast could break. In that held breath, the restaurant felt like a stage waiting on a line. One truth, one entrance, one interruption. Victor lowered his shoulders by a fraction and brought the nib to paper. The nib touched paper at last. Then the front doors swung wide. Elizabeth stepped in, wearing a white suit that drew every light in the room to her. No entourage, no theatrics, only purpose. Behind her, agents in dark jackets moved with quiet certainty, badges lifted just long enough to end arguments before they began. Victor kept his smile a fraction too long. The pen hovered again. "Good evening," Elizabeth said. Her voice didn't rise. The room fell to meet it. "This event will pause." 2 agents peeled toward the manager's office. Another pair turned for the cold room, hands open, tones even. A duty supervisor read from a folder, federal warrants for records, terminals, and product lots associated with a list of vendors, including Northstone. The words "probable cause" steadied the air. Investors glanced at one another, pens quietly capped. The board chair stood but did not step forward. Victor laughed softly. "Elizabeth, this isn't necessary. You've been misled by a janitor with a grudge. Then transparency will vindicate you," she answered. "We'll do this in the open." She gestured to a cart an attendant rolled in, sealed envelopes stacked in neat rows. "Each of you has a copy of a timeline and a verification packet, badge-to-door logs tied to manual overrides on vendor approvals, immutable receipts mirroring records before tonight's edits, a lab summary noting post-pack handling on product traced to a shuttered facilities code. Names are withheld pending process, but the facts are complete." An agent set a small evidence bag on the linen near Victor's plate, pre-printed labels from the sleeve retrieved in the cold room. Another produced photos of the access flap cut under a pallet box. Victor's gaze flicked to the delegates. "You see what I endure?" he told them. "Rumors staged by someone who wants my seat." A delegate from Zurich turned a page, eyes narrowing at the timestamps. "These aren't rumors," he said quietly. "These are clocks." Samuel stepped from the service corridor, uniform damp at the cuffs, bucket left behind. He did not move closer to Elizabeth or to Victor. He stood where staff stand. Some guests recognized him as the man easy to ignore. Now they found they could not. "Tonight we requested voluntary assistance from state and federal inspectors," Elizabeth said. "Unannounced visits begin now. High-risk lots are being pulled group-wide. Kitchens will be paid during the stand-down," Victor addressed the agents. "Counsel is on the way." "No one touches a file without my authorization." "You're welcome to call counsel," an agent replied. "We'll proceed under the warrants." He tried again. "At minimum, allow me to complete this signing." These partners flew across oceans. Elizabeth looked at the folder on the table, then at the faces around it. Partners deserve truth more than signatures. She lifted a packet from the cart and passed it to the board chair. "What you decide tonight should be decided with your eyes open. PR proposes a brief statement." "No statements," the chair said, voice thin. He scanned the pages, pallor rising like frost. From the doorway, Alan Brooks arrived with a slim case. He offered an affidavit and a printed recall bulletin. Code continuity from plant 1189 through 2 rebrands, he said. Spice profile consistent with masking. Preliminary readings indicate handling after sealing. The Dubai delegate closed his pen. We sign nothing until this clears. Staff edged back from the tables. Phones hovered, then lowered when an agent reminded the room of the warrants. Victor set the pen carefully beside the folder. This spectacle will hurt the company. What hurts, Elizabeth said, is danger dressed as consistency. For a long moment, nothing moved. Rain stitched silver on the glass. The restaurant that existed to flatter suddenly reflected something unadorned, a choice between habit and honesty. Victor turned to leave for his office. An agent stepped into his path, polite, immovable. This way, sir. Elizabeth did not raise her voice. We'll cooperate fully with investigators. We will protect guests and staff. We will rebuild the chain where it was rewritten. Her eyes found Samuel. He nodded once, a promise kept. The night exhaled. No applause, no toast, only a room surrendering to facts it could no longer decorate. Samuel stepped out from the service corridor and into the circle of light around the long table. He didn't rush. Shoulders square, chin level, eyes steady. He looked exactly like what the room had chosen not to see, and exactly like what it could not ignore. An agent asked his name for the record. Samuel Reed, he said, night janitor. After a beat, former food safety engineer. He set a scuffed folder on the linen. Chain of custody begins here. The first document slid to the nearest agent. Receiving ledger, kept behind the thermal label printer, damp, partially wiped. 2 hands, block print and rushed corrections. Corrections initialed VL. He tapped a column. Weights in minus weights out are short by whole cases. Those cases reappear as marinade waste in Victor Lang's weekly reports. A second sheet followed. Counterfeit invoices. Vendor, Northstone Provision, never approved. Approvals fired by an auto rule, spoofing the CEO's initials from a store IP between 2:03 and 2:18 a.m., Thursdays. Maria, with a slim binder, added a printout. Manual overrides from an in-restaurant terminal occur minutes later on the same nights, she said. Badge logs place Victor on site. Alan Brooks produced photos. Plant code continuity to a shuttered facility, he said. Seals show heat warp consistent with post-pack handling. Spice profile on suspect lots matches masking. Samuel lifted a small sleeve from a clear bag. Pre-printed labels found under a false bottom in a shipping carton, he said. Plant numbers and lots ready to paste. Across the table, Victor's smile thinned. You've built a mythology out of stains. Elizabeth signaled to an agent, who connected a handset to a small speaker. A video played, plain framing, office light, a face half in shadow. The voice was Darian Coles. Keep the corridor clean, Darian said. If audits sniff, burn the scraps and call it waste. Use 2276 on the relabel. It reads familiar. If the janitor keeps poking, HR will handle him. Get the woman out of the kitchen and back to her corner. The date stamp ran along the bottom. File hash matched a printout Maria held. Recovered from Victor's office phone under warrant, an agent said. Cross-checked against carrier logs. Victor laughed once. Deepfake. Anyone can stitch a voice. Alan slid forward a sheet. Formant analysis and device provenance say otherwise, he said. Metadata shows local capture at 1:54 a.m., 2 nights after the first Northstone auto-approval. The Zurich delegate closed his portfolio. That is not noise, he said. That is intent. Samuel didn't look at Victor. He addressed the agents. I warned her on a napkin, because men like this count on people like me being invisible. I logged what I found. I touched as little as I could. I brought it so the record would be louder than me. He turned one last page, a photo of the printer's misfires, label fragments reading Grafe D and K 4-7. Practice runs, he said. Not accidents. The board chair's voice rasped. Mr. Lang? Victor reached for the pen he had set down, then stopped midway, fingers trembling as if the weight had changed. "You're risking a franchise on a janitor's grudge," he said. "Varnish gone." An agent stepped closer. "Sir." Victor pushed back from the table. Chair legs scraped, his knee buckled. Crystal rang. For a breath, the man who choreographed rooms failed to choreograph his own footing. He steadied himself on the edge, color drained. "This is a setup," he tried again, softer. Elizabeth's reply stayed level. "It's the truth." The agent recited rights in an even tone. Cameras did not flash. Staff stood along the walls, aprons heavy with relief and fear. Samuel closed the folder and stepped back to where staff stand. He did not bow. He held still, tall and quiet, while the room recalibrated around a center. Victor's legs went again, not dramatic, not staged, just the body of a man out of stories. He sank to the marble, breath catching. Someone reached to help. He swatted the hand away, then didn't. The pen lay where he had left it, useless and very small. The contract no longer asked for anything. The only paper that mattered was the one that showed where the numbers had truly gone. Victor knelt on the marble, breath shallow, one hand on the table, as if the cloth could steady him. The pen lay inches away. Around him, the room held its breath. Waiters froze in doorways, the quartet stilled, and the board chair stood pale. Elizabeth stepped closer. The white suit caught the chandelier's gold, but her face carried no ornament. She looked at the man who had choreographed deference and profit and lies, and she spoke without heat. "You poisoned more than guests. You poisoned our trust." No one applauded. The sentence landed like a seal pressed into wax. An agent moved to Victor's side. "Sir, stand." Another collected the pen and closed the contract folder, sliding it away from reach. The Zurich delegate tucked his glasses into a case and looked at the table as if it were a stage dismantled plank by plank. Victor tried for a smile and produced a grimace. "This is theater," he whispered. "You needed a villain." "Evidence needed a name," Elizabeth said. "It found yours." The agents lifted him and turned him toward the hall. The motion stirred the room. The hostess with the floral tattoo pressed a hand to her apron. A dishwasher made the sign he learned from his grandmother. A line cook stared at his shoes. The quartet lowered their instruments with care to silence. A delegate from Singapore asked, almost to himself, "How long can a chain rot before the first plate tastes wrong?" "Exactly as long as people choose convenience," Alan said. Maria's phone vibrated. She scanned the alert, then met Elizabeth's eyes. "The vault propagated to the regulator's portal. Copies sealed. No one can sand that record now." The board chair cleared his throat. "Miss Crawford," he said, "thank you for acting when we hesitated." He did not look at Victor. He looked at the staff. Victor's shoulders sagged, the fight gone to residue. "You think handcuffs make you clean," he muttered. "Handcuffs make time for cleaning," Samuel said, steady at the periphery. He wasn't grand. He was simply there, tall as a compass line. Agents recited rights with the even cadence of people who respect procedure because it holds chaos back. Victor answered nothing. He did not ask for water. He did not ask for the pen. Reporters waited beyond the velvet rope. PR tried to shape a corridor with murmurs. The delegates stepped aside, offering space, not sympathy. A photographer lowered her lens when an agent shook his head. The moment did not need another frame. Elizabeth did not follow the procession. She turned to the room and addressed the people who made it function. "The kitchens will remain closed until inspectors clear them. Everyone will be paid through the stand-down. If you raised concerns and were ignored, my door is open. Tonight does not end with shame. It begins with repair." The sous chef's towel stopped twisting. Someone at the bar exhaled a laugh that was not humor, but relief loosening its knot. Lilies perfumed the pause, as if the air could change. Security guided Victor past the mirrors. He kept his head level until he saw himself reflected at full height, a man in a champagne suit bracketed by dark jackets. He flinched then, a small recoil from a picture he could not edit. At the threshold, he turned, not to Elizabeth, but to Samuel. "Custodian," he said, the word curling, "you have no idea what you started." Samuel's answer was quiet enough to be a private oath. "I started stopping it." Cuffs clicked, doors opened, rain moved him into the night. Inside, the board chair placed the contract folder into its case and closed the latch. He didn't say later. He said, "We will rebuild with proof." Elizabeth nodded. "With proof, and with people who refused to look away." Stuff began to move again, not in panic, but in retuning. Candles snuffed, burners killed, cold rooms sealed with tape signed across the seam. Maria boxed the transparency packets for the partners. Alan drafted the next round of sampling. Samuel set his bucket by the wall, empty now, a tool retired from a different battle. The chandeliers still shone. Their light felt earned. 1 week later, the atrium filled with aprons and jackets, clipboards and laptops, the hum of a company relearning. The board chair stood to the side, not center. Maria manned a small table with a public link and a stack of plain language timelines. Alan held a thin folder of lab confirmations. Reporters waited, inspectors mingled in daylight. Elizabeth stepped to the podium. No flourish, only a promise. "Today we announce the Ethics and Supply Chain Safety Fund," she said. "It will finance independent audits, whistleblower protection, inspections, and emergency pulls. It will fund scholarships for food safety techs and grants for suppliers who choose integrity. Most of all, it will ensure the truth cannot be edited. Governance will include line workers, suppliers, and an outside seat. We will publish quarterly reports, run an anonymous hotline staffed by clinicians, and partner with state labs and universities. Retaliation will trigger automatic review with pay protections. A share of profits endows this fund beyond today and tomorrow." She paused as the words settled. "We failed when we trusted convenience. We will not fail again." A murmur lifted. Elizabeth continued, "We're also creating a new office, ethical oversight. It will sit apart from operations and report directly to the board and the public. Its first director is a man many of you never saw, though you passed him nightly." She turned. Samuel walked forward in a dark suit, posture straight, eyes steady. Only a narrow orange stitch at his cuff remained. Hundreds of employees faced him. Line cooks, servers, dishwashers, accountants, buyers. Silence now meant respect. Elizabeth offered him the badge. "Director Samuel Reed." He took it and stood at the edge of the podium. "This office exists to make sure no one can poison trust while pretending to season meat," he said. "We'll keep doors propped for inspectors." He looked at the crowd and added, gently, "Some of you warned. You were ignored. That ends." Hands rose with questions about process, protections, pay during stand-downs. Maria answered specifics. Alan outlined sampling cadence and vendor probation rules. Elizabeth promised open calendars for surprise walkthroughs. The plan sounded like work, not theater. A sous chef swallowed. "Why should we believe it sticks?" Samuel met him there. "Because it isn't mine alone," he said. "It's yours with mine." And because we will measure what we mean, he let quiet hold a beat, then spoke the line he had carried through years of mops and night halls. "Unsung luon tim jen ngoi kien han cho no," he translated for the room. Light always finds those patient enough to wait for it. The words opened a door. A dishwasher lifted her chin. A buyer closed his eyes and nodded once. The applause began uncertain, then gathered strength. Afterward, staff filled the aisles to shake hands and share names. Some said they had tossed away labels they didn't trust. Some said they had been scared to speak. Samuel answered each story, noting them for policy. On the mezzanine, the board chair signed the charter, creating ethical oversight. The pen mattered this time. Evening warmed the glass. People emptied back to kitchens and offices, not to bury a scandal, but to build a standard. Elizabeth stood beside Samuel as Maria packed timelines, and Alan carried sealed reports to the inspector's car. For a moment. Samuel stood alone beneath the atrium skylight, back straight, hands easy at his sides, the badge catching sun. A week earlier, He was a man the room stepped around. Now the room aligned to him, a figure cut from patience and proof, the quiet shape of justice made visible. Before we say goodbye, we'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee, or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let us know in the comments. We read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, we hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart.